Okay.
And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Rebecca John Dial. Rebecca is a graduate of the program, 2015-2016 fellow. She is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Augsburg, now University in Minneapolis. Prior to being at Augsburg, she's held a whole variety of positions, executive and marketing leadership positions in private and public companies, technology, internet development, financial services. So quite a bit of background in that. In her current role, she works with, obviously, the president's leadership team, and actually her project she and I worked on her project, which has now come to fruition in a brand new building, in the marketing and all the things were associated with that. So that was a lot of fun. She also works with the Board of Regents and various other aspects of the community there at Augsburg in communications. So it's great. She's got a master's and MBA from Augsburg, Master's of Arts in Organizational Management from the University of Phoenix, and a Bachelor of Arts degrees in Communication and Journalism from the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. So Rebecca, you have the helm.
Okay.
I remembered to record, so.
I should share my desktop. That's my cue, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Let's see how this works.
Screen. We practiced this. Did it work?
You're good.
All right. So I thought I would focus this conversation on not teaching how to market. Some of us studied it for, we have degrees in it, right? There's too much to do in an hour. But more to share how marketers think, so that when you're working with them, they might make a little more sense to you. That's kind of how I want to do this. This is a picture of the marketing team at Augsburg. Pretty at the holiday party. This is, pretty typical, right? This is what everyone thinks about marketing teams. I remember I was talking to CC Stephen in the middle there. I'm the one with the butterfly on her face. The woman in the cowboy hat came over to me. I was talking to somebody about some work or something, and she's like, "Ma'am, you're needed," so that we could take this funny picture. So, we do have a lot of fun, but marketing isn't just about that moment of inspiration. There's a lot of planning and science behind it, and I think people miss that. So I want to start with this, and in case you're worried, I'm not going to talk about politics. But the point of this slide is about awareness. So if you look at the midterm voter turnout in 2018, which was way higher than anything since the 70s, the reason so many more people came out to vote was not because they were aware that they could vote. Right? Awareness did not make that increase. People thought it was important. Something happened to make them care about it. They were motivated to act, and then there are lots of efforts to help people actually get to the polls. And so what happens oftentimes for marketers when we're pulled into a meeting and we're going to launch something is the group that is asking for help says, we got to get the word out. So they start with awareness. And that's not untrue. Of course, awareness is a requirement for any behavior, but it's not a sufficient condition. Right? You got to get a lot more information. So marketers have a ton of questions. When we start asking all these questions, and the people we're working with, you can feel it right away. There's like resistance. Like, come on, we just need a website and a social media strategy. And so I want to get at some of those questions, because when you take the time to figure them out, the results can be much, much more powerful. And here's an example of how it shouldn't work. These are approximately real data. I made up some of it, but in the fall of 2014, Augsburg, in its traditional day undergrad program, had a pretty bad year in the fall. Look at that bottom line there: 380 students, and we go for 450. And so you look at that number, and literally the comment was, "We've got to get the word out." Now look up at the funnel, the very top. Inquiries were right on the mark. We even got people to apply. Lots of people to apply. We admitted them. We were doing really well after admits. And then after they were admitted and talked to us and talked to other schools, they chose other schools. Our problem wasn't up at the awareness level. Our problem was that they had better choices down lower in the funnel. And so if you just start with awareness, you can pour a ton of money into that top funnel only to get the word out to more people to convince them not to buy you, right? If you have a bad product, Stephen reminded me of the Oldsmobile campaign. It's not your grandfather's Oldsmobile. Did that go? I didn't know this part of it. So I remember the campaign. It was really, really catchy. It got a lot of attention. I remember it. But then what happened was that people went in, it worked. They went in to test drive the new Oldsmobiles, but they kind of drove like grandpa cars and nobody bought one. And they ultimately had to, close the business down. And so, your awareness needs to happen when you have a good product, when it's true, when it'll actually pay to fruition. Otherwise, you're paying money to convince people to learn about the negatives of you. And that's a big mistake. So, we're not in marketing, not just trying to be difficult. We're trying to make sure that we're looking at the right problem, solving the right part of the customer journey when we're asking all these questions. So, I made this for you. It's a bingo card of the kinds of things we hear. There's a lot more. And, if you're ever in a meeting with a lot of marketing people, they might be jotting down in the margins, every time these things are said, and, maybe having a contest. And these all jump to the end. They jump to strategy and creative. They jump to tactics and creative. And you actually can't do much with some of these. Make it pop. It doesn't actually mean anything. I mean, I think that people know what, I think people mean, I want it to grab attention. But of course you do, right? Why would you run an ad that didn't want to grab attention? And so these things don't actually help the planning process. And creative is actually enhanced by constraints. The more you narrow the problem, the more you say, this painting needs to be in this frame, this art has to be made of these materials. Now you've got a problem to figure out. If it's just all wide open, you can do anything, and that's probably not going to make it effective. And so, if you don't want to sound like a rookie, I wouldn't start with these things. Here's our problem, marketers. The stuff we really need to know isn't quite as catchy, and people aren't always, this doesn't roll off your tongue to say, who are our audiences and are they reachable? And what solution do we have that addresses an unmet need? And what is our strategy and how do we measure it? And then we get into the how. How do we do this creatively and what media do we use to do this? And so we're going to go through those kind of in order today. The middle one, the what, I want to make a comment now. There's a reason I put unmet need in there. Increasingly, in our society where we have so many things that we can buy, not that we have all the money to buy them, but we have so many choices. Marketing, advertising doesn't really create demand. It only can find unmet need and say, hey, that thing that's bugging you, here's a solution for it. And so when someone comes in and says, we're launching a new master's program and blah, 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 and we need the marketing department to create demand, I'm just like, do not sign me up. I don't have enough money to do that, and even with all the money in the world. Let me use an example. Pepsi-Cola spends a lot of money on brand awareness, right? We all know about Pepsi, lots of ads, and yet I don't buy Pepsi, right? They can't make me want Pepsi if I don't want it. And so if it doesn't fulfill a need for me, I'm not going to buy it. So you actually have to have a product that does that. I see. I have a little song. Most of you probably have seen the very popular Simon Sinek TED Talk. If you haven't, you should watch it. He's talking about leadership, not marketing. And he says, start with the why, not the what. Start with why you do what you do, not what you sell. And then sell to people who believe what you believe. And that's going to work better. And he's not wrong. But over on the right is a more recent piece, Michelle Bachman, I don't know him, he wrote last summer, and he's talking about community. And he says, start with the who, then why, how, and what. And with marketing, especially in our fields that are service industries, right? We're not selling chocolate bars. The people that we serve are close to us. Our students are close to us. Our volunteers and our donors get involved with our work. The people that we serve, actually come in and we physically interact with them. Not unlike a hotel or a coffee shop, the service industry. And when it's a service industry, it acts a lot more like a community than it acts like a leadership, organizationally. And so starting with who is really important. We'll talk about who, then why, then how. Oops, I'm going to talk about who, then why, then what, then how. I just noticed that I have mine in a different order. One comment on the who. This is true for marketing, and it's also true for big internal or big like crisis communications. When you're putting together a communication plan, and again, you start with who. Who needs to know what first? So we were recently, Tom didn't mention, Stephen and I work on an integrated team with Augsburg University and Luther Seminary. So the marketing and communication department is integrated. People from their employees and our employees are on one team. We work together. So we were then involved with launching a new Masters of Divinity program that goes year-round for 2 years. It's called MDivX. And the meeting where we sat down and said, how are we going to roll this out, started with, who do we need to tell first? So the faculty needed to know, and the lifelong learning team needed to know, and Augsburg needed to know because it was going to change something, I can't remember what it was over at Augsburg. We made a list of the people who we needed to talk to individually first. That's part of the communication plan, or just maybe it's called the work. And then here's the letter to the board. And then let's make sure our big donors know about it. And then let's make sure our students know before we launch it publicly. So maybe the students are loyal customers. And in the case of a social services organization, it might be more like the referral, your partners who refer people to you. Not so much customers, depending on what your goals are. And then you go out to prospects, so that by the time you're advertising to the world, everybody else feels like they've been cut in on the deal and they understand it, right? What you don't want is to surprise your own people. Word of mouth always has been, still is, the most powerful medium. So you don't want to blow the chance for somebody that works for you to help get the word out, right? So they go home for Easter and somebody says, hey, I heard about that new master's program, and they say, I don't know, nobody tells me anything. That's not what you want to have happen, right? You want that person who works at Augsburg or your school or whatever to go home and at minimum say, I've heard about it, I'm not going to do it justice, let me get the link to you. Or I'm super excited, I heard that it helps more students get through in a cost-effective manner, or whatever, that one top line. You want to equip the people closest to you to be able to at least tell one line of the story before you try to go out there. And this is why we start with who, because if you don't write this list down, you're going to get it out of order and you're going to surprise somebody who should have known. And then not only are they not going to be happy about the communication, but they're actually going to be negative when talking about it because they were surprised in a negative way. So that's what's on our mind when we think about who. Now let's talk about what, which is really strategy. You could call it business goals too. And so I'm using an example here. Augsburg has a program for students in recovery, and it is a cherished program. You can imagine these parents, and some of them quite wealthy, whose children had severe drug and alcohol addictions to the point that they didn't know if they were going to make it, like live into their 18th and 19th year. And then they started to get some success in recovery. And then they're like, now what do we do? Like, how do we go to college? Isn't that a big risk for falling back and all this stuff? And so when they're able to find a program and then their child persists through that and gets a degree and has a productive life, these parents are so grateful. There's just absolute love for the program. And they love it so much, they want everybody to know about it. That would be their marketing strategy. We want everyone to know. But that's actually not going to help us. Here's when we actually talked to the recruiters and sat down and figured out what was going on. Here's how it actually looks. So you've got these families with children in recovery, and they're dealing with that. They're dealing with addiction and fear and a lot of family emotions. And most of them might not even know that there are colleges with recovery programs. Some of them might. Many of them work with recovery professionals and the Hazeldens and the Betty Fords and that kind of stuff. And a lot of them know, for people of that age, that there are collegiate recovery programs. And some of them know about Augsburg. And what we found was When the recovery professional tells the family there are collegiate recovery programs, the family starts to research and look at a number of them. When the recovery professional says Augsburg has a program, the family does not shop. They call Augsburg. And so we're the only one in the consideration set. And so what we wanted to do was to increase that red bar, make it wider, make so that more recovery professionals would name Augsburg when talking to these families. And who we ignored was everybody. Families with children who are not in recovery, I mean children who don't have addiction, they do not want to hear about this program. This is not of interest to them. They hope they never have to learn about this. This is not me, this is not my family. Trying to get into their head, as busy as we know all people are, is just wasted money. In case someday maybe they might run into somebody who might need it. That's not a good use of money. We didn't go there. And so a strategy is actually the logic. Usually you see mission, strategy, goal, objective. The strategy is actually the string that pulls those things together. So it sounds like this for this program. The goal is to increase enrollment in the step-up program. Our objective is to have more recovery professionals name Augsburg when talking to families with college-age students who are 6 months in recovery. Now, if that's what you're trying to do, your tactics become a little more evident. Well, how can we get these recovery professionals to do that? Well, we're going to meet with them. We have to talk to them. We can mail them something, but we shouldn't put a billboard up. That's not going to do it. So the tactics get narrowed by understanding what you're trying to do. This is what marketing is really trying to do. Get this logic together. Just a couple more thoughts on strategy. I heard this example a couple of years ago. It was super helpful. The strategy is an approach whose alternative can also be viable. So in the financial industry, Fidelity is a high-touch, investment service firm. You get somebody to pay attention to, you pay a fee. And Vanguard started in the 70s, but it didn't take off until like 20 years. I just heard a podcast about this. They were hoping to get some $100 million of investors when they first launched, and they got 11 million. And for like 10 years, they only had $11 million of people. They invented the exchange-traded fund, the index fund, where you just invest in a subset of the market, and if the market goes up, you go up, the market goes down, you go down. And the idea there is that no matter how smart you are as a portfolio manager, you can't consistently beat the market. So you're only going to do over time as well as the market, and then charge a fee. So the client is losing. That's the theory. And so those two ideas compete. They can't compete this much. This podcast I just listened, the guy who invented the exchange traded fund recently passed away in January. That's why they were talking about it. So in 2018, Warren Buffett concluded a 10-year bet with a set of hedge fund guys. I don't know if they're all guys. And it wasn't Fidelity. So they made a bet in 2008 and said they each put in $500,000. And then whoever's portfolio grew more, they got to pick which charity the end amount went to. And so he picked the first Vanguard exchange traded fund, S&P 500 index. And the hedge fund guys did what the hedge fund guys did. And, the first thing that happened was the crash. And so the Vanguard thing tanked, and Fidelity like 40% down, right? And the hedge funds only went down 20% because they were a little bit smarter. They could see it coming, they could do some stuff. But by the end, the index fund, and I'm not giving financial advice here, just outpaced the hedge fund by a lot. And so they're both viable strategies. You could argue either one, and that's what you have to look for. They did an interview with the main guy from the hedge fund, and he said two things, just so you know. I gotta do some caveats on the financial thing. He said, one, that period of time, 2009 to 2018, was an anomalous time. Within the realm of all possible times, there's probabilities it can happen, but it was an anomaly. It was a fluke, he said, in terms of how much the market grew. So, by a time-based thing, Buffett got lucky. And the second thing he said was, but if you don't have a lot of money to know how to find the smartest and best hedge funds, then you should buy exchange-traded funds. So he went there right away. So these are not strategies. The academic excellence is not, the opposite doesn't make any sense. And a website is not a strategy because not having a website. And this is what usually, when we're pulled into a meeting, we get. We need a social media campaign. We need a website. And again, we're going to go, what for whom? What does it have to say? Blah, blah, blah. And so if you can start at the beginning with the marketing folks, with the who and the what we're trying to accomplish, they're going to help you a lot more. All right. So then we get into what. And in that upper right corner there, this is just one I found online, they state the problem, and it's not even very fancy. Quaker oatmeal sales go down because people don't take the time to eat breakfast, or they grab breakfast on the go. Now, they didn't just make that up. They did a ton of research to make sure that that was true, and that was the real driver. But the problem is usually pretty simply stated once you get there. And I've gotten pushback from people who they don't want to work on the problem because it's so negative. And so fine, call it an opportunity, but actually it usually is a problem. Often when you're trying to fix something, it's a problem. And if you can focus on it, your solution is going to be so much better. And so this thing is called a creative brief. And here's the part that the marketers really want to get to. Remember, let's pretend we already know who we're trying to talk to. This would not be everybody. This would be a certain segment. And we ask, what do they think now? And what do we want them to think in order to change their behavior? And then why should they believe us, right? So in this case, people think, I don't have time to do everything, so I got to cut some stuff out. And what we really want them to think is that it's not a question of time. It's a question of energy. If I eat my oatmeal in the morning, I'm going to have a better day, more energy, etc. Right? That's what you give to the creative team. I have no idea what they're going to do with that. I'm not actually that good at it. I can't imagine what they'll do with this. But they're going to come up with something exceedingly more persuasive and catchy by having this clarity up front. So then we get into the how. And there's two kinds of how. One is the science or math. And I got to move my screen so you can see what I'm talking about here. And the other is the art. So I'm going to go through the math part first. I won't go through all these numbers. And it's a little blurry. Sorry, I grabbed a screen, did a screen grab. So this is a list of different kinds of digital advertising that we did for a certain campaign. So we bought a list and we did some emails. And in the Star Tribune, we were on their website. And Star Tribune is the Minneapolis Metropolitan Daily, and did some emails through them. And then brand.net, that orange category, that's a company, there's lots of them, that get your ads out on different websites, mobile, pre-roll before the video shows, just display. Retargeting is when you click on something and then that thing follows you around forever, right? So you don't want to show somebody your laptop in a meeting because it's going to show the socks you were buying last night, that kind of stuff. And then Pandora, right? And in the advertising world, the way we used to think about how to evaluate the value of an ad was we take the number of impressions, that's the number of people who see it. So you see those numbers. And if we only cared about awareness, we'd look at that 1.9 million and that 2 million in the bottom. Those are the ones, right? Those are the biggest hits. They give us the most eyeballs. That's what we want. And the way you looked at advertising before digital was cost per thousand. That's what CPM is, M being the Roman numeral for 1,000. So what is the cost per 1,000 impressions? And you can see that after you do that, some of them are more expensive. So the Star Tribune email is $65 per 1,000, whereas Pandora is only $3.69 per 1,000. All right. But that doesn't really tell you who's motivated or the quality of their experience with the ad or how any of it worked. So now, because it's digital, we have clicks. So scoot over 3 columns and you see the number of clicks. And now we can calculate the cost per click, which is the far right column. The job of these ads, they have one job, and their job is to get you to the website. The website ideally has one job, which is to get you enough information, not all the information in the whole wide world, but just enough that will make you inquire. So then we can talk to you and get you more. And so if these ads are not driving clicks, they're not doing their job. And when we look at the cost per click, you see that the Star Tribune stuff in the red there, they're outrageously expensive. $31 for one website visit. But down below in the mobile stuff, you get under $2. And then the Pandora one, which I never looked into, but it was a question I had. This is a little bit old data. It's so cheap. So many people are clicking. I wonder if they're trying to close the ad and then they accidentally open. That was my suspicion back then. So we spent $60,000 over 6 months to get 9.6 million views and 26,000 click-throughs at an average of $2.32. And what I was doing with this slide at the time was explaining to the board, and that's 30% of our budget just to do this. So when people are looking for general awareness, they don't know that we're talking about millions of dollars to do that in a metropolitan area like Minneapolis, multiple millions. So this is how much it costs. It should really be step 1 of 3, because the other 2 things you got to do now is, one is doable. You look at the results and you say, well, let's put more money into the highly effective ones and less money into the low effective ones. The big shops, the General Mills and the Coca-Colas of the world, they have algorithms to do that. Places like us, we got to put it in a spreadsheet and do manual analysis, and it's slower. The other thing, which cannot be done, but I keep asking, someday maybe, we have a very sophisticated digital marketing service. And what I really want to know, the real question is, which of those clicks, let me just go to clicks, which of those clicks ended up enrolling at Augsburg? I want to know cost per enrollment. What if all of these clicks ended up in nobody coming here, and we could cancel our entire advertising campaign? Sorry, Stephen. And all we need to do is have the admissions officers go to high schools and write. I'm making it a little too simple, because people tend to take action based on a number of stimuli. And so if you take one out of the mix, even though you have no evidence that it's working, it might change the result in a way you hadn't anticipated. The reason we can't do this today is that Google Analytics can track you through to the inquiry, right? So if you go in and you go to the site and you inquire, it can say, this person from this source, this ad, this Google search, inquired. And then you can take that record and compare it to who actually enrolled, match it up. Again, this would be manual in Augsburg's case, and see which ones were the most productive. The problem is we have so many devices and people clear their cache that we can't tell at the point of, and you go back to a site multiple times. The second time I go back, the 5th time I go back, I just type it right in the URL box. I don't search for it. I don't click on an ad. And so we can't always tell what the source was that drove the behavior of all the sources of specific enrollee. But that would be that's the holy grail of what we're trying to do with numbers. Oops, did it again. Okay. Less number-oriented, but just a little more high level in terms of figuring out which media to use. This is how marketers think. But the more we can target the marketing, the bigger bang we're going to get for the buck. So that's why Google search ads are so popular. Because if somebody is searching on MBA Minneapolis, I think they want to go to an MBA program in Minneapolis. And I can't find those people by mailing to their house or putting something in the magazine, in the newspaper, right? They're actually have an intent, and I can capture that by getting an ad in front of them. And then we talked about remarketing, the other thing where you go to a site and then the ad follows you around. So the idea is, by having gone to that site, it sounds like you were maybe interested in that thing, and we're going to bug you for a certain amount of time because you probably didn't make a decision the first time through. Now, there's all kinds of jokes about that where people have bought a sink online, and then they get ads for sinks, and it's kind of like, well, I just needed the one, and I'm not going to buy a whole bunch of those. So that's our first goal. Then you move into targeted marketing. So by demographics, we might know the age, or the income, or the geography, sometimes gender of the audience. And so, or even with Facebook, you can do, I don't know, we didn't find this to be that effective. You can do lookalike audiences. So you can take a list of people who have been in your inquiry pool, upload that list to Facebook. They will find people similar to those people, lookalike accounts, and put your ads in front of them. And so we don't actually know what's driving it, but these people have a similar psychographics or interests or somehow. And we'll see. I first heard about that from the YMCA. And when they first tried it, they were getting 3 and 4 times as many inquiries as any other approach they had been trying. So with Facebook, we can filter by a whole bunch of things: country, age. We can find people who, I think this is true, right, Stephen? We can have people with some college but not a bachelor's, or people with a bachelor's but not a master's. You don't want to be marketing your master's programs to people with masters already, right? Most people don't want to have two of them. Over on the far right is the mass market, and this is the one where people, tend to start. And Mark, I don't know how he says it, the marketing cartoonist guy. Oops, didn't mean to click yet. Previous. I gotta see. Marketunist, I guess is how he has a whole book on stuff. And this is just the bane of our existence at Augsburg, where every 3 or 4 years, we get a new person in who's just hot on billboards. And you know what? I'm not against billboards, but I told the board, because they were also saying, we just need to get the word out. I don't see it anywhere. I said, we got to do the demand capture first, right? Those are people actually looking for our stuff. And they said, yes, you're right. And then I said, we should target after that, like people who have enough money to go to our school and have the right credentials so far, but we should hit them next. Yep. And then we can mass market. And they said, yeah. And I said, I'm out of money. The budget runs out in the middle of target marketing. So you can either advocate for us to increase the marketing budget so we can do mass marketing, or you can say, good job, keep going. And they said, good job, keep going, which didn't surprise me. The other one is like Twin Cities Business. It's a very high glossy magazine. And the MBA program for many years wanted to advertise in there. And what they said was something like this, we're conspicuous by our absence since we're not there. And I'm like, that's the average age of the reader of that magazine is 52 years old. And the average age of our MBA students was 33. So it wasn't a good fit. It wasn't going to get, and it's very expensive. It wasn't going to get a lot of play. Again, I'd be fine doing it if we got the other things covered first and we had extra money. But in terms of prioritization, this is how marketers generally are going to think. And then we finally get to the fun stuff, right? We figured out who we're trying to hit, why they might want this, what's the story we're going to tell them, what media we're going to use, and then you come up with the creative. And I think you all know, and I don't know what would happen if I actually tried to play this video, whether it would work or not on here. But I put it in there for people to watch later. The creative execution of this Mac versus PC ad, this one happens to be about virus. So you can just backtrack into the creative brief. They said, we want people to know that the Mac just doesn't have as many issues with getting viruses as the PC. The PC crashes all the time. That's the problem. People don't know that. We want them to know that. And so then they get these two guys, and they cast it excellently in the wardrobe and everything. And in this one, the guy in the suit, who's a very funny comedian in his own right, he's sneezing, and he ends up at the end falling down. And he says, I think I got a crash, right? And they're playing into that frustration that PC users had, especially back then, with the computer crashing all the time, going right to that emotion. And then the other one's just standing there fine. He's like, fine, I don't get viruses. But they didn't start there. They ended there. The Got Milk campaign, which if we measure by money or sales, was one of the most effective campaigns in its time, of all time, when it first launched. And it was the California Fluid Milk Producers was the client. And people weren't buying milk. And they were trying to sell it as a healthy thing. Milk, it does a body good. That was the phrase back then. And it wasn't working. And the consumption was going down so fast that they were just like not going to have a business anymore. So they made a big bet. And they got this group in, I forget the name of the agency. There's almost a whole book on it, on how they came up with this. So they had to figure out how people might care about milk, back to that beginning, not just awareness. They knew it was good for you and they didn't bother. So one of the things they did, this took them a long time, and they kind of happened into it. There wasn't like a roadmap. One of the things they did is they got a whole bunch of people to agree not to have milk for 60 days or something like that and keep a journal. And when they got the journal back, the strongest emotion that they found was frustration at not having milk at the moment, like the chocolate chip cookie or the peanut butter sandwich. That was their insight. And so how do we use, that was the only emotion they could find for milk. And so they came up with the Got Milk line and the ads like this. And at first, those ads were in or near the grocery store. It wasn't just general. It was at the moment where you might be buying stuff and, oh my gosh, we're out of milk. Because they created that not a demand for milk, but that, oh my God, I don't want to be out of it if I need it. And sales went up a lot. Now the milk industry has a whole other problem now with the almond milk and all the milks that they got to compete with. But that was a pretty interesting one. Started in California, it was so successful, then it rolled out and across the United States, and they morphed it into the milk mustache, but it didn't start with that. That was just them, and it was successful. Them trying to figure out a way, using celebrities, because we would pay attention, using celebrities to keep the campaign out there. So they extended the life of the campaign another 10 years by just having celebrities, beautiful people with milk mustaches, and it was fun for us to watch. And now they've retired it, and their new one, which I don't get, doesn't mean it's not going to work, doesn't mean there's no logic behind it, is Milk Life. So I don't know what that means. I just read about it. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And oh shoot, I put one more slide in here and didn't save it. I was going to talk about kind of wrapping up all this stuff, so maybe we don't need I'll stop the share. We just look at each other. I was going to talk about Augsburg changing its name from Augsburg College to Augsburg University because it uses some of these principles. And so that happened we officially launched it in September 2017 with a couple of years of work in advance of that. And so we did a bunch of research focus groups about Augsburg College versus Augsburg University. And these aren't going to sound like stunning findings. You might even think, I would have predicted that. Maybe you would have predicted it. But then we had research to back it up. So one of the things we found about people who knew or didn't know, our focus groups were not people who were even in our inquiry pool. They were just people in the community, high school students who were looking at colleges, people who might go back to grad school. So they weren't close to us. And they cared a lot about Augsburg. The word Augsburg meant something to them. And of course, our closer audiences, they loved Augsburg, right? And so strangers would say something like, when we asked them, if we change from Augsburg College to Augsburg University, strangers would say something like, I'm getting echo right now. Is everyone else okay? Okay, I'll just try to ignore it. Okay, so strangers, they would say, well, if Augsburg changed its name to Augsburg University, I would want to know why. Like they had some kind of investment in it. And then we talked about, so there's some investment in that word Augsburg. Not that we were planning to change the overall name of the institution, but we knew that was pretty important to people. And then we talked about what does college mean and what does university mean. And there's a lot in there, but three things rose at the top. And one of the things was that people believed that a university had academic excellence. And so this was how we got faculty really excited about the name change, one of the ways. I got to say first, we talked about it with faculty for about 2 years before that. They were very resistant at first, and at this point they were like, when is it going to happen? But when we realized that the word university was going to convey a sense of academic excellence that college didn't necessarily as much, and that we stood for that and we'd always meant that, that was important to them. The second thing was that was an opportunity. We said that's an opportunity for you to reemphasize something that people already believe about a university that's true of us. The second one was diversity. People think universities are diverse. I don't know if you know Augsburg, but it's very diverse. At least the day student population is quite diverse. And so that's another one where if you didn't know, Augsburg is very diverse. So that's another thing where university can lean into what we already are. And the third one was that university was big and bureaucratic. And this, we told people, was their opportunity to undo the perception. Yep, universities, but not at Augsburg. We're going to be a new kind that's small to our students and big for the world. And so we gave people this cheat sheet that said, when you say university, people are going to think academic excellence, diversity, and big and bureaucratic. Understand that, and then have a conversation about those three things. Yes, yes, no. And the logo, which Stephen oversaw personally, I should have left. Now I'm going to go back to share my desktop here, just to talk about the logo. See the logo on that page. The old logo was center justified. So the A of Augsburg and the C of college were on the left, and the G of Augsburg and the E of college were on the right. And we made it off center. And so this logo, this is how we talk about the logo. It looks like a university, not a factory, not a entertainment venue. It actually looks like one. And then the two different fonts create a strength in that word Augsburg. That's what people really care about, not the descriptor word. It's in there, but it's not the most important, so it makes that first one strong. And then the asymmetry of it and the leaning forward of it is active and engaged and forward-looking, which is how we're trying to, after a while of talking about this, one of the faculty members said, "You mean the logo is dynamic?" And I'm like, yes, the logo is dynamic. So we didn't go through an approval process. We're kind of stunned. Steve and I think about it. We're like, look back and go, how did we do that? We didn't go through an approval process. I mean, we presented to people, but nobody ever voted. Nothing ever happened around any pushback, which does, I mean, you've seen huge logo issues. In fact, Stephen and I, before we ever met, were both at a conference, the American Marketing Association Higher Ed Symposium I forget where we were. And the California state system had just tried to launch a new branding system for all of their schools, right? They weren't going to change the name or the logo of Berkeley or any of them, right? But they had this for the system. And there was a couple mistakes they made. I won't go into those, but the guy who was at the center of that was presenting in this packed room. I was standing room only. I'm in the back. Oh, I was going to wear the T-shirt. I didn't wear the T-shirt. And so he tells this whole story about they launch it, and within a day, there's a change.org petition. Don't change the logo. 50,000 people sign it overnight. They ended up pulling back the logo. The whole brand, they did all the brand work they should have. The idea was that there's so much research happening in the California system that your daily life, you're touched by that work every day. And that was how, so it was California Forward or something like that. So they still use the phrase, they still use the creative brief, but they pulled the logo back. And it was just a nightmare for him. One of his points was that brand isn't only a logo, so they could still do the whole campaign without the logo. But as he's talking, and I'm in the back of the room because I got there a little bit late, I remember seeing this huge table of T-shirts and canvas bags out there. And I realized that those are the tchotchkes they made before they had to kill the logo. And so I go out to grab one because they were so popular. Everyone wanted a dead logo T-shirt. So I still have the T-shirt of the logo they never were able to launch. So Stephen, when did you start at Augsburg?
I started it's been 4 years next month, so March of 2015.
Okay, so pretty soon after Stephen starts, we're starting to talk about Augsburg University and what we're going to do. We both look at each other. We're like, let's don't do what California did. How do we not have that happen, right? And we just watched, I don't know exactly what happened at Augustana, but I think they tried to do a big reveal and it didn't quite work, got out too fast. And we decided, nope, we're going to do this thing. This is back to the who, so that nobody's ever surprised. We're not going to drop a big curtain and hope everyone goes, yay, because if you do that, they could go, yuck, right? And so we showed everybody as if they were on the inside. Well, they were on the inside. Made everyone feel like an insider all along, to the point where, okay, so we get to May, we're going to flip the name by September. So we got all summer to change the website and the signs, everything. Huge project. Amazing work by the team. And by the time May rolls around, we couldn't stop people from using it. The international recruiter's like, but I need the new stationery now. Can I just have a website, please? The faculty were starting to use it in their syllabi already. We're like, it's a done deal. We're starting now. So we had a hard time holding people back by that point because of how we had buy-in from the way that we pulled them into the conversation and the way that the story made sense to them. Okay, so I forgot to say at the beginning, of course you guys would ask questions if you had them, but and I told Stephen he couldn't ask this. So I'm guessing there's stuff in there that just might not have, like, really, that doesn't sound right, it doesn't line up. Was there anything in there that you're like, yeah, that doesn't fly with me, I don't understand that? Or any thoughts or questions?
Hey, Rebecca, I found this question of billboards really, really interesting because I went through, and Phil, I don't know if you remembered any of this at Concordia, Texas, but we kind of went through that whole thing too.
Seems everybody does.
Oh gosh, we need more billboards, blah, 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 blah. And that's unfortunately my phone. But what we did find out, there were a few times they were really good.
Okay.
And we put one up in downtown Austin when we were moving. They kind of said, "We're cool."
I can see that, yeah.
Everybody knew this was going on. It had been in the newspaper. I don't know if you remember that, Phil, but it was right downtown, heading probably around 15th Street on the east side, heading north, and one near the campus heading south. Just kind of going, you know.
What? How do you know it worked? Like, what do you think happened?
I had so many people in the Chamber of Commerce and other places just go, "Oh, that was really cool."
So you were positioning your move as a positive thing that you were trying to do, and gotcha. So it can do that.
Only two,
right? And because it was a conversation already out in the paper, right? Yeah. What a billboard is really good at is reminding.
Yeah.
You can't introduce, right? So if the conversation hadn't been in the paper, it would have just gone over people's heads.
Yeah.
But it positioned the conversation people were having. And the people who noticed were the employees, right? You're going to notice a billboard for something, either you or your competitor, sooner than like if you're trying to get strangers to pay attention, that's less likely. Chamber of Commerce, this is the weakness that a president has. So you go to the chamber, you're president of the university, you go to the Chamber of Commerce person wants to say something nice to you, right? Bonding. I saw that. I'm not saying they didn't believe it, right? Yeah. I have seen, it was a long time ago. So we had a big story, small company, big story in the Star Tribune. The headline was really positive and the story was trash. And the CEO would just get great story in the newspaper. It was a terrible story. It went on with them. So you're gonna hear that. Now, I'm not saying it didn't work. I'm saying we probably did very much position you as on the university as on top of its story. Yeah. What did they call MCTC? Minneapolis Community College ultimately put a billboard outside the president's house because they couldn't get him to stop talking about it. And Stephen has the best idea. He wants to create digital billboards, and then you put an RFID on the president's car. And then when the president drives by, it flips to an Augsburg University billboard. You don't have to pay very much. It's one impression, and by impression, it's really cheap.
We won't tell. Lauren and I will never tell Paul that. Okay.
He's not the one pushing for the billboards. I thought that was genius.
Well, and it was at a very unique time that something like that was put up. For a very unique reason. Right. But what I really...
Well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, too. Right. I mean, I did billboards at my previous institution. The goal was to change the institution's reputation.
Yeah.
And A, it was funded sufficiently, which, as Rebecca said, we don't necessarily have the resources to do in the Twin Cities to make an impression. And B, the goal was to change how people were thinking about the university. And that was kind of like what your goal was. You wanted to change how folks were thinking as opposed to generating a lead for an academic program.
Well, to be honest, part of the rest of the reason was to poke the University of Texas, because one was just south of the University of Texas and the other one was just
right. And so they noted, you put up some of the St. Paul schools will put up billboards in our neighborhood, and we're like, grrr. We got one once where I don't know what it said, but there was a billboard between the southern border of Minnesota and the Twin Cities, and people would drive up and they're like, our billboard's terrible, it's terrible. And like, we don't have any billboards. And finally somebody took a picture, and it wasn't Augustana, it was a maroon school, it wasn't Hamlin though. So they had the same color, and they had a, started with, it was not Augsburg. And we were getting emails from people about our terrible billboard. So that's you know, you're driving at 65 miles an hour, you're not really, you know, it created a reaction, but not one anyone had planned.
I only bring that up just because that's really a retreat to something people go a lot of times.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they're functionally useless. So.
Well, they can do what you said, which is if there's a conversation going on, right? You can do this. They used to do the same thing by taking out a full page ad in the New York Times, right? So Pepsi, same kind of story. Pepsi had, this was after the Tylenol scare. Pepsi had a scare where somebody had inserted a syringe in the Pepsi thing and said, I found a syringe in Pepsi. And Pepsi knew right away that had to be tampering, because the way the bottles are filled, they go through upside down so fast, the top shoots up, so there's no way it could have been introduced at the factory. And so they got this person on videotape, and they got arrested and held up. And so then they ran a full-page ad, I don't remember if it was New York Times or Wall Street Journal, and it's a genius advertising. Pepsi Cola is pleased to announce nothing. So if you know about the story, you go like, what happened? And if you didn't know, they didn't introduce the thing and cause you to worry, right? And it's the same thing you did with the billboard, right? On people's minds, and we don't want to leave the attention cycle until our position is out there. And a billboard can do that, yes.
Yeah, neat.
Oh.
How about other questions from the group?
So this is Kevin Gobert, Chair of Faculty Senate. So I'm very interested in maybe just a little bit more about how you worked with the faculty without actually getting their approval for something. You said it was like 2 years, and so, you know, a little bit more about how that went, because you know, there's lots of things that
right.
maybe run that way that might be better.
Right. So the conversations, and I don't know how I wasn't the lead of these. So we had a number of conversations. I remember the report going up in front of the board in October, in January, in May. And at first it was comments made by faculty, students, and alumni. So we had these conversations, and we put up all sides of the picture, right? You know, over my dead body, and they didn't say, someone said that, we didn't use that one, but you know, I came to a college, I'm a college professor. This means something to me. You know, we're gonna lose our soul, that kind of stuff. Maybe it's just more nostalgia, or what's the word I'm looking for? You know, the grieving of letting go, not that it's a bad decision. So we put it all up there. And the faculty were, not surprisingly, more on the, I don't really want to change. It's shocker, right?
Shocker.
And alumni, especially in the grad programs, are like, yeah, can I put this on my diploma right now? And so the board's looking at that, and then so we finally got to the point where we understood what our interior circles thought. And then the board said, now we need to do the market research. So that's when we did the market research, to give ourselves the story. And by that point, they talked about it so much. And then the market research showed that there was really good messaging. And it goes back to that academic excellence. I remember the chair of the Faculty Senate saying, and she's not, you know, my easiest customer, she just was like, this is it. This is the reason we need to change our name, because of academic excellence, which was always true and would have been anyway, right? She's not dumb, but she was like leaning into it. I'm like, there we go. Our biggest concern about the logo was that the board would want to vote on it. So Stephen and I actually met with the chief strategy officer who runs the board agenda with the president and said, how do we do this? Because it's true. I don't want to be dismissive or anything, but the board doesn't have the skill set to evaluate whether this logo is going to be a good logo or not. So why would we let them vote? And so we just didn't. We just presented it and didn't have a resolution and said, we'll be rolling out. So I think I don't remember if they passed the resolution to change the name that day, or they'd already done that. Did they?
Oh, I don't remember. I think it might have been, I think they had already done the name change vote.
Okay. Yeah. This was just how we were going to do it. So there was some pressure off, yeah. So, you know, it's not surprising. You got to talk to people a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Shocker.
All right. More than you could ever believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Talk them almost to death so that then, and it almost becomes like, oh, this was, yeah, no, yes, we should absolutely do it. Why aren't we doing this now? Yeah. And
Yeah. When you get there, you know, right. So when you can do that, that's the goal, to help them think it's their idea. Actually, have it be. Right? If you can find something, maybe that's what we did with those verbatims. We found something in their own comments that was true. And so then it was. We weren't just placating them. It actually was their idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah.
I will we'll stop the recording, get that done, and then if you could send me the slides when you have a minute, I'll also post those for everybody too.
I'll put the last slide in there that shows that sheet I talked about too. Sorry about that.
That works okay. Hey, well, thanks a lot. Stay warm.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see you around next week when we're up that direction.
That's right. I'll be thinking about you if I don't.
Okay, you all take care. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.